Okay, I'll go ahead and kick it off. So for our North American attendees, I very much appreciate the early morning call, particularly our folks in Austin. And seems like we have a number of folks from Europe and India, so thank you for joining. This is Dan Kahn. I'm was the executive director of the Cloud Native Computing Foundation until last month. I still am the vice president of strategic programs at CNCF, and I'm now the general manager of the Linux Foundation Public Health Initiative, which is going to be launching in a couple weeks. So I wanted to give just a short update on me and the Telecom initiative and Priyanka and such, and then hand it off to Taylor to talk about the event last week and the progress on the CNF testbed. So the good news, or hopefully good news that people see it that way, is that I am still very much involved in the telecom work for CNCF. And in fact, I'm continuing to lead the telecom user group and the CNF testbed and CNF conformance initiatives for CNCF. So Priyanka and I have spoken about this repeatedly and in some detail. I think most of you will have seen that Priyanka Sharma joined as the new general manager for CNCF, and she has a ton of different issues on her plate, and agrees that telecom is extremely important, but has asked me to stay on and continue managing that indefinitely. And let me just say a minute more on that, which is that we both believe that CNCF's really spectacular, kind of unprecedented growth over the last few years can't continue indefinitely, and has likely come close to plateauing, partly due to coronavirus and economic slowdowns and conferences moving virtual and such, but more just the fact that we kind of have pulled in the entire industry. I mean, we have every big cloud, all of the enterprise software companies, et cetera. And so there are some limits to growth. I think folks are aware that over the last 4 years, we've grown from 28 members to 560. I believe that was when I left a month ago, stepped down, and we're now at 571. So definitely not done growing, but I think the pace has slowed. But she and I also both agree that telecom remains one of the biggest growth opportunities for CNCF. And so we already have a number of those organizations, or in a lot of cases, your organizations as members, but now trying to do the additional work to demonstrate how Kubernetes can be used as the substrate of modern telecommunications platforms. It has really been the purpose of this group, and all of that work continues. So folks are welcome to reach out to her, and I know that several of our biggest telecom members have, but I also encourage you to reach out to me. And so if there's things that you'd like to see differently about this call, or concerns that you have, or ideas or such, I really do encourage you to ping me. I remain very active on CNCF Slack, and then I am available to do a call with anyone, and you can just book onto my calendar at this address, which is the dancon.com/c. So the two other kind of announcements that I would make is one is that unfortunately we have decided that a KubeCon North America is also going to be a virtual event, and I don't think that's a huge surprise given the unfortunate path of the coronavirus in the United States, where it still is very much not under control. And so we are hard at work on those plans, and you'll see a lot of them coming together over the next couple of months. Of course, right now we're focused on the KubeCon EU happening much sooner. And then the other part that I just want to mention is that we do have this telecom white paper that is basically done. We're just trying to line up the final a couple authors for. And I do want to apologize. That delay is definitely on me, where I also am trying to launch this LF Public Health Initiative and get a bunch of our founding members together. And so, but my expectation is that both of those things will finally happen this month, but they kind of got piled up behind them. So I think that's my introduction. Are there any questions anyone has about that content or my participation in it, or other information folks would like? Or should I go ahead and hand it over to Taylor? Going once. Okay, Taylor, could you tell us about maybe the CNCT meeting this month would be a good place to start, and then you could give us some other context as well.
Sure. Thanks, Dan. Trying to see who else is on the call. Is Bill Mulligan? He was talking a little bit with me about the CNTT, specifically the LF forum. Okay. Well, the LFN forum had a lot of the CNTT related items for the folks that weren't on that. I'm sure that a lot of people on here were on that, and including tracks from about the OVP initiative, OVP2 specifically for the OPNFV verification program, for the CNTT Kubernetes reference, and also tracks from OPNFV and ONAP, and from the, I guess, the CNCF Telecom side, and specifically around the CNF conformance, as well as the CNF testbed. We've been attending a lot of those and trying to see where we can collaborate. So there was a lot of conversations around tooling, sharing different ideas and stuff around that. On the reference implementation calls, there's a lot of conversations about the environments, how to bring up both from provisioning hardware, networking, all the way through actually bootstrapping Kubernetes. And I think there's a lot of the terminology that's maybe not consistent enough to make sure that everyone's on the same page, and that rolled over from the LFN forum talks and our conversations into some of the CNDT weekly meetings this week, going into both the implementation as well as the reference certification meetings, the RC2. And by that, I'm referring, if you look at some of the tables that CNTT has on the wiki page, one of them is about Kubernetes installers, and was maybe some confusion. I think it's again because of the terminology, but confusion about what is handling Kubernetes, very specific parts of maybe having the software initially start. So how do you get the pieces to initially start communicating versus the tools that can maybe provision the machine, set up prerequisites, decide on components like how many nodes do you want in the cluster, or even handling maybe more life cycle management aspects of taking down the cluster and bringing stuff up. So hoping to, I think as part of those conversations, many people were wanting to define what we're talking about there so that it's easier to see what could meet the requirements. So an example of this would be kubeadm is one part of the whole, if you look at the layers of how you're going to build up clusters before you run a workload, kubeadm is used by many different tools, like KubeSpray uses kubeadm behind the scenes, but KubeSpray handles a lot of the other provisioning, and kubeadm itself and the docs point out what it handles and says what's out of scope. But some of the language, even in those documents, Kubernetes documents, will mix setting up bootstrapping versus provisioning. So I think a part of the documentation that's going to be updated maybe over the next couple of weeks is trying to address that, so that when we're talking about tool chains, it'll be clear where what layer that we're talking about. And then the other part was, I think that ties in with the CNF conformance specifically, although it's similar in the CNF testbed and some other efforts and other projects, initiatives, is how to make things compatible so that people have choice to come in and plug different things in. So OPNFV has a CI/CD tool chain that runs stuff like Kubernetes conformance on their CI/CD chain, specifically on the Kubernetes side that they're doing testing. So how can we plug in other things? If someone has a CI/CD chain, how could you plug in something else? So the CNF conformance right now has you could call it a first version, or it's a little bit past proof of concept at this point, but the results that come out are generated YAML configuration for CNF conformance. And we've tried to think about forward compatibility to plug into other things. I think probably what we're going to be looking at over the next several weeks is how to more directly support running the CNF conformance as a gate for pipelines, whether that's something like if it's part of the OVP and running directly in the CI/CD pipeline, OPNFV if it's wanting to be able to use it similar to other tests that are running, it could be one of the requirements, or even more directly for operators or a CNF developer. A vendor could be using it as part of their CI/CD pipeline for testing software. An operator that's acting as an integrator could use the CNF conformance. And for those who haven't heard it, to maybe bring this back, what is in scope for CNF conformance? What the CNF conformance is doing is it's trying to validate if an implementation, whether that's a workload, so the applications that are running, or the actual platform, Kubernetes with all extensions and whatever else may be running, are they implemented in a way that's following cloud native principles? So what's out of scope would be integration functionality specific to maybe someone cares about specific protocols or something else. What the CNF conformance is looking at is if a protocol is being shared or services are being offered, are they doing it in a way that's cloud native? And that's what we're looking at testing. So you can think of it as one of the many checks that someone may desire whenever they're doing testing. So from an operator perspective, which one of the comments from LFN in LFN forum many times, and you've potentially heard this other places, is operators act as integrators often between all the different software that's coming from the vendors and other places that they or taking stuff in. So this would be a gate or a check whenever they're bringing software in, and as it's even going to production whenever they're doing the testing. CNF conformance would be validating, is that software actually designed and implemented in a cloud native way? So again, I think that it's been there kind of implicitly that we want it to support integration, and what we'll be looking at is how to more directly support that. So that was one of the big things coming out of there. Let's see. There's some folks that were on the LFN forum, and hey, Michael Peterson, I see that you're on. You've been on a lot of these RC2 calls. Does anyone have any comments about the CNTT and the LFN? I have some more CNF conformance specific things, but before moving on.
Maybe I can jump in. Hey, this is George. We have been creating an RI2 implementation focused project in OpenAV to formalize the development process a little bit more. So out of the CNTT RI2 work stream, which of course initially focuses on identifying requirements and defining what the implementation looks like based on the reference architecture too. The OpenAV project is focusing on providing the corresponding reference implementation, just as described by Taylor. So if anybody's interested in contributing to that, given your knowledge, interest in getting that work up and running to combine CNCF related efforts like this with the OpenAV project, feel free to reach out to the team. Basically, I can post a link to the project proposal here. I'll find it in a second. The project has recently been approved by the OpenAV TSC. We don't have a dedicated wiki page yet, but you should be able to find this. Now I need to stall kind of a little bit. Here we go. Okay. There we go. Feel free to reach out if you're interested in supporting that. And yeah, that's basically all I wanted to say.
I'm curious if you can say what installer you're planning to use for this reference implementation.
Yeah, it is currently, this is still very early work, and since the RA2 is still very much work in progress, it's also an investigation kind of process on the RI side. Currently, we are looking at an installer around CubeSpray. So CubeSpray would be the basic framework, again, then using CubeADM under the hood. I think those are the latter one is the obvious choice. CubeSpray is the Ansible playbooks collection that then gets extended by another set of playbooks maintained by Intel. So it's an Intel BMRA, it's bare metal reference architecture. It's basically a showcase deployer for Kubernetes with really a lot of different pre-integrated extensions, ranging from Maltus to Device Manager. All of these, well, very often telco-specific extensions of core Kubernetes. But I would like to point out that it's not in any way, I would say, yeah, not decided is probably also not the right term. We are happy to have discussions around what installer actually should be used. So Taylor was referring to the wiki page where we're looking at the feature set basically of various different installers. And to be honest, yes, there's a mismatch of levels in there because there's kubeadm and kubespray, which are not on the same level. But please forgive us this. We also we will potentially be looking at Airship because that's a very Teco focused thing as well, and that's being used in CNTT on the OpenStack side of things. And since it's at the core, it is Kubernetes. Obviously, that will be looked at also.
Yeah, I
so
would
yeah.
definitely recommend kubespray. I think it, as being part of the core Kubernetes project, has done a very good job of keeping up to date on that and its use of kubeadm and such. So I think that's a great choice.
Yeah. So that's for sure part of the set of installers we're going to look at. And obviously, the goal is to use CNCF components and not much else. Obviously, there might be a little bit of extra tooling around that, like the bare metal provisioning. It's one example, but yeah.
Thanks, Michael, for
Thanks.
posting that link. The link for the current what's labeled installer comparison, Michael Peterson posted that, and kubespray's listed on that. I think what may happen is we may end up with another table that makes it a little bit more clear on what is subcomponents or the within the larger ones, like kubeadm as used by kubespray. Kind is also on the list, and Kind uses kubeadm underneath. I'm not sure if AirSpray is using something different at this point underneath, but a lot of them are doing that. But it has a list at least of a lot of the different items, and the features I think is probably what will end up making a little bit more clear. So we have something that's very specific and then higher level management. Probably what would be good is some diagrams that talk about how you layer things up from hardware provisioning, network, all the way up and to the point where you have, okay, now we can connect some of the Kubernetes components, and then how do you manage those? And of course, something like Airship does a whole lot more across all the layers, and that's fine. We can say some things can do multiple layers and some focus on one. All right. One, I guess another thing that came out of the different talks was, and specific at least to CNF testbed, there seems to be still a desire to use the tool chain and the environment set up that came out of CNF testbed in other labs and other places, and that's been ongoing since the start, but it's increased a lot for the last 6 months. And out of the LFN forum, one of the ideas that's come out is potentially taking one of the available labs and trying to target and add support for that. And I think efforts to do that can help the lab to have the capabilities to support other tooling, and probably would be something that could help any other tools that are also wanting to support multiple labs. So one of the specific ones that we're looking at right now from the CNF testbed is the OPNFV lab as a service. And we have some conversations going about that. And if that moves forward and if it looks like a good match, and we end up with support for targeting that lab as well as Packet, then I expect the updates for the CNF testbed to make it easier to target other custom labs or just other services. Most of the underlying tool chain is already kind of set for targeting cloud provider type things. It uses KubeSpray, which can target any set of machines for the setup on provisioning. It has Terraform for actually requesting machines. And those parts we could split those off and use something else. So I think we have a lot going there. And George, it may be something interesting to talk about how to take different work that OPNFV is doing and be able to target other labs. And if we have the capability to target multiple places, then it's most likely the improvements on the tool chains. Those are going to get better, and share those ideas, and the target labs, like exposing stuff like the networking. How do we configure those and have it not tightly integrated into maybe a higher level? So I'd be interested in talking some about that with you. And I do know that, and Michael, you may have more information on this, but since you've been so directly involved with the CNF testbed development, there are people that have been using the CNF testbed in their own labs, operators specifically, and some vendors doing testing. But we want to make that more available so that anyone that's wanting to have what the CNF testbed does can use it in their own lab for testing, playing with different cloud native technology options, whether that's platform or workloads, is the idea with that. So that I think it's a good complement to other tooling that are being maybe very opinionated and trying to pick specific tools. The CNF testbed is more about allowing someone to take it and try out different options that they're exploring before they decide on a specific thing. So,
yeah, I can add a few comments there. I think it's definitely possible to deploy it outside of the packet environment that we're using, but I guess it adds a few more manual steps in the provisioning phase. Some of the additions that we install alongside Kubernetes, we've been trying to make them more generic over the past few months, and I think some of that was a result of Packet doing changes to some of their servers. So even if we deploy let's say an N2 extra large, we can say for certain exactly what CPU SKU we're getting, and I guess it has a little bit of impact with the CPU enumeration and PCI devices and whatnot. There's still work to do there, but at least we're gradually modifying what we already have to try and generalize it a bit more. And similarly, I think some of the playbooks we have now can probably benefit from being split out a little bit. I think a lot of the I guess the platform optimization right now is done alongside the vSwitch installation, and I think if anything, it might be good to kind of separate those two entities, even though they're still done in separate roles at this point. And of course, given the way it's all implemented, it's quite easy to add additional features and changes to it, and you can just set a flag in one of the configuration files to install it.
For those that aren't familiar with either the CNF testbed directly, the toolchain, or maybe even that language, Ansible would be a part of it. So the roles and playbooks that Michael was referring to, we're talking about Ansible roles. So these are the items that are, say, non-Kubernetes native as far as handling those things, which could potentially in the future be handled directly. Some of them may be handled like cluster API and other things can handle more and more of host setup. But right now that's what a lot of those parts, this would be either before KubeSpray comes in, so setting up some host specific things if we want to optimize those, and what you set in the configuration, and then potentially if there's anything that you want to tweak after the fact. But that's what those parts are for. Getting the machines ready on host and network for the underlying machines, nodes and network that you're going to run Kubernetes on.
Yeah, exactly. Maybe if I can add one more sentence here. That is because like the current RI2 work has specifically looked at that, and we, sorry for getting to mention that, we have also looked at the CNF testbed before. And then right now, because of the reason that both the CNF testbed as well as the Intel Beam array is making use of KubeSpray as a deployer that requires some pre-provisioning, and the OpenAV CI/CD pipeline has typically been like an end-to-end deployment thing where you just need to have something to do the deployment of the host OSs and then put either one of those on top of that. So getting that end-to-end workflow done would be like one of the obvious next step on that side of the project. And exactly what you just mentioned is then part of input to various upstream places wherever it fits best, like making sure that I don't know, you have the right host
OS configuration. Whoops, sorry.
Or you just went in and out. Host OS configuration, networking setup, and so on and so forth. Yeah, in order to make that work, we separated those two steps logically in a provisioning, configuration step if needed, and then putting a selected Kubernetes deployer on top of that. And yeah. And unfortunately, I need to drop now. But Trailer, happy, and Michael, happy to follow up with you on these discussions. And yeah, so I'll be around.
Thanks, George.
Sorry, guys. Bye-bye.
All right. So on the CNF conformance side, we've just finished a first round of beta testing on the CNF conformance and gathering feedback. We had a group that was consisting operators and CNF developers that are working on different parts, engaged in a lot of these different communities and familiarity. And of course, everyone is open to go and try out the software, use it, CNF conformance software. This was more of targeted trying to get specific feedback on how the whole process of getting set up and running it, using it to test a workload, and how the interactions with the actual tooling was, and try to get feedback on that so that we could target installation setup, make it smoother for folks to get going, and to help with guidance on the actual results and other items like that. Overall, it was very positive, and we're planning on breaking down all of the feedback and looking at it from a perspective of guiding on updates and features. And we're some of them, the maybe early pre-beta setup and testing. Michael, thanks for helping with some of that, and some of the other folks. We've already taken some of their feedback and started rolling it in for updating documentation, consistency for getting things set up, the way that the actual CLI for the CNF conformance tool, once it's actually built, how it works. And taking feedback from that and started making updates along with going through using it repeatedly, team-wise and people that are contributing, going through and thinking from a CNF developer that's wanting to test their software or use the tool for helping to improve the cloud nativeness. So if someone is actually developing software and they're in progress on supporting specific cloud native principles, we want to be able to use the tool for providing better and better feedback. So that was the goal with a lot of the testing, and we've been trying to take that perspective and come up with a lot of little updates and stuff that have, many of them have coincided with the beta feedback that we got. And we're in progress to make those updates, and we'll continue with whatever feedback we have. And we're also looking at the platform specific testing and how that could run to test how to actually, what are the implementations in a Kubernetes based platform. If you look at extensions and how it interacts with the host and other parts, how would something that a telecom platform would look like? So Kubernetes, all the extensions, anything else, operators that may be running, and how do we test that those are implemented and actually using cloud native principles? So we've been building out a first round of here's some things to test, and we'll be starting to implement some of those tests to run soon, along with all the workload tests that are running right now, and we're going to continue on that side. But we would be happy to have more testers if you want to whether you want to do it on your own, and you can feel free to go through the existing documentation, whether it's source-based, we have source-based installation, or you can use the binary and more simplified approach to getting things up. We'd be happy to get your feedback that way. And if you'd like to be part of another more targeted beta test round where there's a specific set of instructions and more focused, then happy to add you to the list for doing that. Just let us know. And we are going to do some specific testing with several groups. We are, of course, working with CNTT and trying to look at how to integrate with the certification side and OPNFE, like George was talking about, for being able to run CNF conformance as part of different testing that they do. So we want to support those projects from a side of maybe closer to CNF developer side. We're going to work with projects like Network Service Mesh to be able to test various examples. Hey, Nikolai, I see you on the call. And if you're a CNF developer or you know someone who'd like to start testing specifically on the software that you're using and work with us to test what you have, as well as maybe get better feedback that would help either as a developer or to make sure that we're handling stuff, whether it's stuff like handling data in a cloud native way or microservice specific properties, then let us know. We'd be happy to work directly with you. I think that covers it from maybe updates and stuff. If anyone has any questions or comments, then happy to try to answer those, or if you have another topic.
That's great, Taylor. Thank you very much for the updates. Okay, let's end things there. Thanks everybody for the call today. We will be available on Slack and email. And our next call is in a month. Goodbye.
Thank you.
Thanks. Bye.